Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Ansh. Just checking if you guys can hear me. Let me know.
Yeah,
Hey, Rishabh. Good morning. Good morning, Nick. All right. Is everyone ready to get started? Let me have a quick yes in the chat window. Okay. Nice. So, just a quick word. Rishabh, you can enable your microphone. So, if you look at the top of your screen, you should be able to see the microphone icon. If you click that, your microphone will be activated. Go ahead, try to say something as soon as I can hear.
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, Rishabh, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Good morning, all.
All right. So, guys, we will start with. So, I just have a quick question over here. But just before we start, just wanted to let everybody know we're going to take this slightly differently today. So, today we're going to go for 1 hour for the discussion instead of half an hour for last time. We went overtime last time. So, we're going 1 hour this time, and then we'll have half an hour for discussion. As always, I will put the question up over here, and you guys will get a couple of minutes to solve that question. And once you're ready, we will start the discussion. First question should be in the chat window. Please go ahead, give it a shot. I will let you guys know when 2 minutes are over. Please start. All right, so that's 2 minutes. Let's get started with the question. Um, Now, first of all, please check your answers. The correct answer is A for alpha. Now, uh, if you, this question, one of these options, and that's, if I remember correctly, that is option B for Bravo, has an incredibly rare error. So we rarely see this on the GMAT. But can anyone tell me what it is? It's a very big error, but you don't see this very often. Go ahead. Let me know. Unmute when you're ready and let me know. What is the problem with option B?
So basically, option B is saying that the dark spots had never been sighted on the surface of the sun
Hmm.
and the sun's poles or equator.
Right.
So it's
So
two
go
things
ahead.
that saying that it's not visible.
Oh, are you approaching this from a meaning perspective?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're looking at absolutely, you're looking at the right place. But before you even think about meaning, I want you to just try saying it to yourself. So, what happens many times is we tend to forget that there is a non underlined portion also when we're looking at the underlined part. So, what I want you to do is I want you to read option B but I want you to read it with the non-underlined part. So let's try that. Blah blah blah. Sunspots are visible as dark spots that never have been sighted on the surface of the sun, the sun's poles, or equator. Now, remember, there's no comma over there, right?
Mm.
So if you try saying this, the surface of the sun's poles, or equator, it should sound really bad because we just have multiple things that have just been squashed together at the end.
Yes.
Um, right? Awesome. Quick check. Is everyone okay with this? Why option B is out? Let me have a yes in the chat window. Excellent. So everyone's comfortable with this. Now, I want you to turn your attention to option C, C for Charlie. Sunspots appear on the surface of the sun. Now, the first thing we notice here is now the beginning has changed. We have switched from sunspots are visible as dark spots to sunspots appear as or appear on the surface of the sun as something, right? Now, over here, my question to you is, would you make this so right now you have a split in front of you, right? A split just means a difference between two options. But when we see a difference between two options, we also need to take a decision on whether we want to do anything about it, right? Do we actually want to action this or not? So that's what I want to ask you guys. Let me know either in the chat window or by unmuting. Do you think that we should try to take a decision on are visible as and appear as? Let me know whenever you're ready. Okay, so Nick is saying that both seem okay to him. Okay, and I think the rest of us are thinking. Now, let me give you a little bit of information about appear as, right? Um,
Yeah,
when you,
yeah, that's
yeah,
what
go ahead.
I feel. That's what I feel like. Appear as feels like something is appearing as it's like maybe a secondary thing, but that's not the convey. Like that's not the meaning that needs to be conveyed here.
Right. So, then we'll have to check, are we comfortable with that meaning call? Do we want to take it or do we want to focus on something else? And that's what I thought I'd just quickly let you know. So when you say are visible as, right? Are visible as basically means that this is what they look like to you, right? So visible, when you say visible, that means somebody's looking at that, right? So perhaps from a human perspective. When we say appear as is used in two major ways. Appear as could mean something like this. He appears as her husband on the TV show, right? Appear as means to play a particular role. That's one meaning of appear as. The other meaning of appear as is something that comes up very often in a sort of medical context. So when you say something like the disease first appears as rashes on the skin or something like that, right? So appear as has a couple of meanings, right? And we can use appear as to discuss how something shows up, right? It's one of the meanings of appear as. So over here, although there is possibly a difference over here, my recommendation would be try not to take this meaning call. So there may be a meaning call, but I think the meaning call may be so close that or so hard to take that it would be better to focus on other things, right? So for example, we've removed option B for a very, very good reason. And now we're looking at option C. If you look at the end of option C, although never cited at, right? Now, if you just come back to Adobe, let's quickly discuss this concept. Although never cited at. Let me write that down. Aha, now Shohini is asking an important question. She's saying there is no verb in the dependent clause. And what is the dependent clause? The dependent clause is the one introduced by the word although. Remember, although is a subordinating conjunction. Now, the thing to remember about although is there is some scope for ellipsis over here. So, if you start a sentence, personally, I like this particular sentence. I use something like, although he was busy, he solved 10 questions. Now, first check. This should sound okay to us, right? This is a. I mean, we use the word although all the time. Quick check. Is everyone? Nick is already confirming that this is okay, right? Although he was busy, he solved 10 questions. I think Rishabh is also confirming, right? So I think this is very common usage. The point that we want to focus on is the first part of the sentence is a dependent clause. Now, just remember, don't make the mistake of thinking that although is connecting two independent clauses over here. That's not what's happening. The first part of the sentence is a dependent clause. And that will always happen because although is a subordinating conjunction, it subordinates whatever comes after it. And of course, another term for dependent clause is subordinate clause. The right hand side is where you have your independent clause. Now, the point we're trying to discuss is when you start with an although, right? And you share a subject. So the subject is exactly the same. Then in the dependent clause, you don't have to explicitly mention the subject and the verb. So you can cut the sentence down and you can say, although busy, he solved 10 questions. So, Shohini, to answer your question, now in the dependent clause, it seems as if we don't have a verb, we don't have a subject. The point or the way I want you guys to think about this is although busy is fundamentally the same as although he was busy. The only difference is the subject and verb have not been explicitly included. You're expecting your reader to fill in the blanks, like understand what you're trying to say. Now, the real test of whether we're comfortable with this or not is really going to come from whether you guys are okay with it. So let me check. Let me label these. Let me call this example 1. Let me call this example 2. Are we comfortable with example 2? Okay, I've received, I think, 4 or 5. Okay, everyone's confirmed. Excellent. Now we come to the third one. If you want to do this, understanding away the subject and verb, you're welcome to do it if you start with the dependent clause. You don't want to do it when you start with the independent clause. So you don't want to say something like, he solved 10 questions, although busy. This is not correct. So if you're doing this, if it's at the beginning of the sentence, the dependent clause is starting, go ahead. It's absolutely fine. I mean, there could be, the GMAT has tested us on specific things. We'll discuss that in a second. But it's fine, right? It's possible if you start with the dependent clause, but not if you end with the dependent clause. Quick check, is everyone comfortable with this? The third one, that is, that it's not correct. Okay, I think I've received 3 yeses. Maybe the rest of us aren't sure about this. Remember, you can always unmute. Okay, I've received another couple of yeses on this. Guys, always just remember, you can always unmute and ask your question. So you don't have to, wait for me or anything to finish. All right. Now, there are just a couple of things I want to discuss over here. The first one is Rishabh's asking a question. Please go ahead, Rishabh.
So my question is specifically about this question.
Mhm.
Since the whole sentence is in a continuous form, there is no comma separating any independent or dependent clause.
Mhm.
So will this although count as uh, a conjunction?
Subordinating conjunction?
Yeah, I mean just okay. So
No, I
although.
get your question. So basically, what you're asking is you don't see a comma there between your subordinating conjunction and the rest of the sentence, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right, let's take a second to address this question because it does come up quite often, and there are different opinions on this. Even within the GMAT prep industry, a lot of people have, let's say, a very conservative kind of approach, and other people have a more liberal approach to this sort of issue. So, just for the sake of, just making everything clear, let me write this out. Now, the question that Rishabh is asking is, if you have an independent clause, comma, and then you have a dependent clause, right? Some people say that this comma is 100% required. Right? Let's call that the conservative view. Like hardcore, the comma has to be there. Punctuation is like an absolute. These are the types of people who will be very confident saying that Oxford commas, etc., are absolutely necessary. And let me clarify. If you start with a dependent clause and then you have your independent clause, right? You must have a comma. This has to be there. Nobody's going to seriously debate this. But what Rishabh is asking is if you have an independent clause followed by a dependent clause, right? You don't have a comma over here, what happens? Now, there are a couple of things. The first one is that although some people believe that comma is required, in our classes, we don't do that because we follow a more liberal approach to punctuation. Rishabh, I'm not sure if you were here. I think this is your first time attending the session, right? Rishabh, just quick
Yes,
check.
yes, yes.
Okay, so Rishabh, in the previous session itself, we had done a question. That was the Glass House Mountains question. So there is a question. It starts like the Glass House Mountains were sighted by James Cook. Right? There's a question like that. Right? Can you just quickly Google for that question and open it up on your screen?
Okay, so it's glass or class?
Glass.
Okay.
The Glasshouse Mountains in Australia were sighted by Captain James Cook. Once you've opened it, let me know. Meanwhile, I just quickly walk the class through the rest of what I wanted to say. The word although is always a subordinating conjunction. It cannot be anything else. So if you see although, right, it will always introduce a dependent clause. All right. Now we're going to wait on Rishabh over here. Rishabh, let us know when you've opened that up.
Yeah, I've opened it.
So can you just paste the link to that question
I
so that
think Divya,
everyone can also open it?
yeah, I think Divya has already posted it.
Oh,
Is
excellent.
it okay?
Thank you, Divya. So I'm also going to open it on my side. The point I want to make is from what I remember of the question, right? I'm just going to quickly confirm it. But what I remember of the question is the correct option does not use a comma before because. So the correct answer in this one is D for Delta. You're right.
Mhm.
Do you see that because over there in option D?
I think there is, we are looking at different questions.
So I'm referring to the Glasshouse Mountains question,
So is this the same link?
the one that Divya sent. Yes.
Yes, because.
So do you see option
Yeah,
D?
yeah, yeah. No, 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 it's clear. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the correct option, and there is no comma before because, right? So I typically try to ask people not to look at punctuation as being way up there with absolutes. Quick check. Rishabh, sounds okay?
Yes. So my question still remains the same.
Hmm.
Like since comma is not there, so
Hmm.
we'll be still needing the whole subject verb thing after although. Like we what we discussed here is in the first
Hmm.
case we have mentioned the subject and verb to make the complete sense, but we can omit it in the second example because the subject still remains same for the which is used in the independent clause, but we cannot
Hmm.
do for example 3, correct, because there is a subordinating conjunction word here, and
No, no,
so
no, no. That's where we need to modify our approach. The third example has nothing to do with the fact that although it's a subordinating conjunction. The third is just a pattern. So when your subordinating conjunction comes before, right, and on the left hand side, you can do this. But when it comes on the right hand side, you can't do this. That's how you should remember it. Nothing else is changing, and I don't want you to worry about this comma.
okay.
Although is still a subordinating conjunction, it's always a subordinating conjunction, like because. These words literally cannot be anything else within your sentence. In English, that's the only role they can play. Quick check. Rishabh, sounds okay?
Okay, yeah, okay, I understand now.
Awesome. So, guys, just remember it this way. If you want to do any of this understanding away business, it's only when your subordinating conjunction starts. It's only when your although starts, right? It's not when your although is at the end, like after your independent clause. All right, now, one last thing over here. Obviously, the GMAT has tested this in other ways. So, for example, if you say, although busy, and things are getting crowded on the screen, but you cannot say, although busy, 10 questions were solved by him, right? Because this would imply that 10 questions were busy. Quick check, is everyone comfortable with the fourth one? All right, I've got 4 yeses. Pratham is also comfortable with it. I'm just going to quickly walk you through the last one because there are some test prep resources that say that you cannot go. So, for example, you cannot say although ing. So, for some reason, they say that. So, for example, if I say although playing an important role in global warming, right? Methane. So, let me just quickly check. Does anybody feel that this sounds wrong? Although playing an important role in global warming, methane. I mean, I haven't written the full sentence, but just the first half. Does it sound okay? Okay, Divya is saying no. Nick is saying it sounds okay. Rishabh is also saying it sounds okay. Okay, good. Good. Now, the point I wanted to make over here is there are some test prep resources that say you cannot do this understanding away if you have an ing with an although at the beginning. I have no idea why they say this. This is perfectly okay, right? And in case you want to just quickly confirm that, there is an actual GMAT question which does the same thing. So let me just quickly put that up. And I promise this will be the last thing I write on the screen. The screen is already completely full. That question starts like this. Although accounting, and right now I'm writing the correct option out. Although accounting, comma, American citizens or US citizens, something like that, something to do with energy use or something, right? The point is that the structure is valid in English, and there is no reason for us to say that this will, for some magic reason, not be correct on the GMAT. Quick check, and let me ask Divya specifically. Divya, is this okay? You can do this understanding away, even if it's with an ing with an although. Oh, okay. Okay, Divya, my apologies. My apologies. So Divya is basically trying to say that it sounds okay. Good. So in case you run across this rule somewhere while studying, that with an although you can't do this understanding away business if it's an ing, then please feel free to disregard it. Pratham, please go ahead.
Yeah, yes, sir. So in the first sentence, we used although he was busy, he gave the test. But on the other
Mhm.
hand, we can also use he gave the test although he was busy. Is that right?
Absolutely. Awesome. All right, guys. Now let's turn back to the question. Option D for Delta, if you look at, so I'm back on the sunspots question. It does the same thing as option C. It says they appear as dark spots on the surface of the sun, although never having been sighted at the sun's poles or equator. So again, if you look at the dependent clause, it's on the right hand side. And again, they're trying to do this understanding away of the subject and verb. This is just a really bad idea when the dependent clause is not starting the sentence, or at least when the dependent clause is not before or in the middle of the independent clause. So it's just a really bad idea when the dependent clause is right at the end. And the last option, let's quickly go over that, which appear as dark spots on the sun's surface, which have, okay, my apologies. Please spend a second looking at option E. There are 2 things that I want to discuss over here. Just take a second, just read option E again. Sunspots appear as dark spots on the sun's surface which have never been sighted on the sun's poles or equator. Now, the first point over here is the which is slightly weird because it may be pointing to the sun's surface, right? So that's not 100% clear. But what I wanted to do is I wanted you to think about what the sentence should be saying, right? What the intended meaning is. If you look at the correct option, option A says sunspots are visible as dark spots but have never been sighted at. Now that word but is a coordinating conjunction. A coordinating conjunction basically means that the things that are being joined are at the same level, right? So sunspots are visible as dark spots on the surface of the sun, but have never been sighted on the sun's poles or equator, right? You get the feeling that these are 2 important ideas, or at least that they are both equally important, that they're visible as dark spots on the surface, but have never been sighted on the sun's poles or equator. But if you read option E, it seems as if we're trying to say something where the second idea is not important at all. Just try reading it out to yourselves. Sunspots appear as dark spots on the sun's surface, which have never been sighted on the sun's poles or equator. Which introduces a description. Why should we introduce a descriptive phrase over here? It just seems to make more sense if we make the two ideas equal in importance. Quick check. I think I went through this one very quickly. The last point. Quick check. Are we comfortable with this? The meaning difference between using a but and just sticking that idea in a which. Okay, excellent. I think I've got yeses from almost everyone. Perfect. All right, guys. Now let's move on to the next question. Let me put that up. Please go ahead. I'll let you know when 2 minutes are up. Right. So that's 2 minutes. Now, there's not too much that I want to discuss in this particular question. Let's quickly go over some quick points. In this question, in option, firstly, the correct answer is E for echo, the last option. Option C, overlooking that, right? If I remember correctly, this is not considered idiomatically correct by the GMAT. And specifically, the structure that we're looking at is overlooking followed by a that dependent clause. So my guess is that the GMAT would be more comfortable with overlooking followed directly by a noun. So for example, if you say overlooking the fact that, right? So if you just put a noun over there, I think they would be more comfortable with this. Personally, I have seen this structure outside the GMAT, but for this, we probably want to follow the GMAT's guidance. Now, what I wanted to ask you guys, right? So, from my side, I just have a couple of questions, and they're both for you. If you look at options A and B, you will see a pronoun, it. My question to you is very simple. Why is that it wrong? Whenever you're ready, please unmute and let me know.
Yeah, so the thing is the natural response of communities devastated by earthquake or flood. So here we are
Mhm.
referring to two things, and the forces that caused it cannot be referred here.
Okay, so what's wrong with the it?
So if we are referring to the earthquake or flood, which one of them? Like, what is the forces that caused it?
Um, it's
So,
probably the destruction
uh,
of the
hold,
communities.
hold on for just 1 second. I think that's Pratham, right? Pratham. So let's let Ansh finish his point and then we'll come back to you. So, Ansh, I just want to confirm, are you removing that it because of pronoun ambiguity?
Yes, like the fact that the forces that caused it, we are not clear what we are referring with that it.
Fair enough. So it may refer to earthquake, it may refer to flood, it may refer to site, right? There are multiple nouns over there. Fair enough. Pratham, please go ahead.
I thought the forces that caused it was probably the destruction of the communities that took place.
Ah, but the noun destruction is not there, right?
Ah, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So let me extend Ansha's point over here. One way to approach this is to say that the it is ambiguous because you have multiple nouns before the it. A natural response, then you've got earthquake, then you've got flood, and then you've got the same site. These are all singular nouns, and they're all possible candidates for that it, that the antecedent of it. Now, that's fine, but pronoun ambiguity is a level 3 error, right? So I just want to check whether this could possibly be a level 2 error for us. Now, imagine that it does not refer to a natural response because the natural response is not what caused it. I mean, not what got caused. And imagine that it's not referring to the same site. So basically, out of 4 candidate nouns, let's say we have removed the first and last ones, and we're left with only earth and flood. So we're magically assuming that it is not going to refer to 2 of those 4 nouns. It can refer either to earthquake or flood. So if we have removed that ambiguity, why is that it still wrong? Remember, I'm asking you to imagine that we've somehow taken that ambiguity away. But my question is, if we remove that ambiguity, why is that it still incorrect? I see Divya's typing. Divya, you can always unmute. I see you haven't actually enabled your microphone yet. Divya, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay. I was wondering if you could just phrase the sentence for us so that, like, with removing the ambiguity so that we know what we're referring to.
So imagine that the word response. So when you say, let me write that down on Adobe, uh, caused it, right? Now, what I am saying is imagine that that it is not pointing to response. And you know that from somewhere, you have some way of knowing that it is not pointing to response and it's not pointing to site also. It can point either to earthquake or to flood. Yeah, just imagine that it's pointing to one of these two. Rishabh, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I think for this particular sentence, when we are
Mhm.
using it, we are referring to that particular earthquake or flood which caused the
Mhm.
destruction in the first place. And obviously, it is not going to happen again. So, we'll have to, by using it, we are referring to that particular flood and earthquake that happened earlier. So,
That's one way of looking at it, right? So, a natural response of communities devastated by earthquake or flood is to rebuild on the same site, overlooking the possibility that the forces that caused it, right? Now, over here, they're not actually referring to like a specific earthquake or a specific flood. But if you think about it, it as a singular pronoun could go either to earthquake or to flood. But the problem is that we don't want to refer to only one of these things, right? Because the communities that are devastated by earthquake or flood, they are not going to look at the forces that cause just one of those two things. Think about it. Look at the correct answer. The correct answer is E, which says the forces that caused the disaster. Now, the disaster is definitely a longer structure than it, right? But it is much clearer because the meaning of the sentence needs us to not care about which disaster we're talking about. We cannot lock down the pronoun to just one disaster, earthquake, flood, because that's not the intended meaning. The intended meaning is either of these two. Quick check. I've not explained this properly or well, but just quick check. Are we comfortable with this? Why just referring to one of them is wrong? We don't want to refer to just one of the two. We want to refer to both. Them would be wrong because there is no plural noun over there. Divya, quick check. Does that answer your question? Please feel free to unmute. Okay, excellent. All right, I think everyone's confirmed. Good. Now, let me just quickly check if there's anything else I wanted to discuss. Yeah, there's one more thing that is useful to see in this question, and that is some of these options, like option A and option B, are saying overlooking the possibility that the forces could be repeated, right? Now, the problem over here is we don't care whether the forces could be repeated. We care whether the disaster could be repeated, right? Like another similar disaster could happen. So, although it's grammatically to say correct to say forces could, I mean, could is slightly redundant with possibility, but it's grammatically okay, right? But we don't want to do that because we don't want to convey the meaning that the forces could be. We don't care about the forces. We care about another similar disaster happening. Quick check: is everyone comfortable with this one? All right, I've received 4 yeses. Shohini, Rishabh's also confirmed. Show any quick check. Is this one okay? Perfect. Excellent. All right. Any doubts in this question before we move on to the next one?
Ajitesh, just one thing. Can you just repeat that why starting with overlooking
Option
is
C.
incorrect?
Shoini, just give me 1 second. I'll just come back to you. Divya, for option C, I think we should just go with what the GMAT says about this. If you use overlooking, right? Overlooking has a couple of meanings that maybe you did not take something into consideration, or overlooking also has, like overlooking means it is above something, like physically above something. So that results in a bit of ambiguity. But so I think the way the GMAT removes this is to say that overlooking should not be followed directly by a that dependent clause. It sounds a little weird. Their position sounds a little weird to me because I've definitely heard this before. But when it comes to idiom, I typically tend to go with what the GMAT says. Quick check. Divya, is that okay?
Yes, so you're saying that we remove it with an idiomatic error?
Yes. So just come back to Adobe for a second. So she overlooked his mistake, right? This is how we normally use overlook. Overlook followed by a noun. What is happening in option C is we have overlook followed by a that dependent clause. This is what I think the GMAT doesn't like. And personally, at least in my opinion, I think they would be okay with it if we put the fact over here, overlook the fact that something, but directly overlook that, I think they consider it incorrect. Quick check. Divya, sounds okay?
Yes, so like option C, we can only remove for idiomatic error.
I think so. I think that's pretty much the only reason to remove it. As I said, the word overlooking is also slightly ambiguous. So maybe that's also something to keep in mind, right? Because overlooking can mean physically overlooking something.
Yes.
Right. Awesome. Rishabh, I see you've raised your hand. But first, let's go to Shohini and then we'll come back to you. Shohini, please go ahead.
I was just asking, can you repeat that? We started that overlooking is not in this sentence, it's unidiomatic, right?
Overlooking that dependent clause.
Okay.
So let me write a sentence out. Maybe that'll be helpful. Instead of saying she overlooked his mistake, what if I say she overlooked that he made a mistake? Does this sound okay? And but actually, to me, I've heard things like this before. But Shohini, does this sound okay? Oh, okay, it sounds okay. So this is the type of thing we want to avoid, or at least what the GMAT possibly thinks we should avoid. All right, Rishabh, please go ahead.
So this is in continuation with the doubt that Divya was having. The reason that I eliminated ABC was considering that this gives a verb ing modifier, and what there is one rule that I have learned that if the subject, whatever the verb ing modifier is doing, should be related to the subject of the independent clause. So, but whereas the subject in our independent clause is natural response, but overlooking is the thing that is being that the community is doing. So that is why I eliminated A, B, and C. Is this approach correct?
But the second thing, right, what you said about INGs having to make sense with the subject of the clause, that will work in many cases because an ING may be used, right, in that way. But it is one of the ways an ING can be used. These present participles are incredibly flexible. So our approach in at least in our sessions is built around minimizing the number of mistakes we make. What that means for you is if you follow a slightly simpler approach, it'll probably work well for you in many questions, and that should be fine if that's what you want. But if you want to focus on minimizing the number of mistakes that you make, you may not want to follow such a simplistic approach, right? So you may want to be more comfortable with ing structures or modifiers in general and seeing all the different things that they can do and being open to them rather than locking them down to just one possible use case. So that approach is not right or wrong. It just has its advantages and disadvantages. So you might be trading simplicity for accuracy, right? At least in certain questions. So sometimes it becomes easier to get through those rules if you just say, okay, it can be only used one way, but then without, basically you open yourself up to the risk that even without understanding it or knowing about it, you might mark the wrong answer because you're dependent on a rule that was not a 100% absolute rule. I'm not sure if that's answered your question, but it's just a matter of approach. There's no right or wrong over here.
Yeah, I got your point.
Excellent. All right. Now I think everyone is ready to move on to the next question. Just give me a second. I'll put that up. The next question is an absolute classic. It is a very good example of modifiers. So I think this is the right time to take it. Let me put that up. Many of you may have seen this question before, but even if you have, just take a couple of minutes, revise it, and I will let you know when 2 minutes are up. Please start. All right, so that's 2 minutes. First of all, let me check. How many of you have seen this question before? As I said, it's a very famous question. I would not be surprised if some of you have done this question before. Okay, Shohini's saying this. Divya's saying she's seen it. Rishabh's seen it. Pratham's also seen it. Okay. Nick has already seen it. Got it. So this is a very, very famous question. Um, now over here, there are basically 2 points that I want to discuss. I want to discuss. So first of all, for anyone who doesn't remember the answer, the correct answer is option A for alpha. From my side, I want to discuss B and C, Bravo and Charlie. Right. Now, let's start with option B. Option B has a verb, extends. Right. Now, come back to Adobe for a second. The point that I want to discuss is that, so basically the question is saying that there is a filigree, right? And then you have this word that, and then you've got a verb is, right? And after that, you've got an and option B gives you extends, which is a verb. Why is this wrong? Why is option B wrong, even though it is parallel? Take your time, think about it, let me know when you're ready. Oh, Divya saying that's not where the list breaks, right? Well, how do we know where the list, where the second element starts? After fungus. Oh, I'm so sorry, Shoni. You're right. You're right. I was just doing this from memory. So over here, the that is after the word fungus. Filigree comes afterwards. It's my fault. Thank you for pointing that out, Shoni. Okay, Divya saying it is a description of the fungi. Okay. This is a really difficult call to take. And, so many people have a doubt about this particular option. Now, let me walk you through why B is not correct. Right? And then I'll ask, whether you're comfortable with that. The problem with option B is not that it makes two verbs parallel to each other. The problem with option B is it does not put a that before the second verb. That is missing. Now, let me be clear. If you have a short sentence and you just say, a car that is fast and or cheap, yeah, that is fast and cheap, right? This would be absolutely fine, right? If you wanted to, you could say a car that is fast and is cheap, or if you wanted to, you could say a car that is fast and that is cheap, right? So in such a short sentence, it really doesn't matter whether you repeat the that or not. But in a sentence where the elements of the list are so long that the reader will struggle to understand where your sentence, as Divya said, where your sentence or where your list is breaking, that's going to be a problem. So in this particular sentence, we're saying a fungus that is an interwoven filigree, blah, 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 and it's really long. And then you've got an and, then you've got extends. By the time your reader reaches extends, it's very hard for them to understand that that extends is supposed to go back and link up with is. And that happens whenever you have a super long list. In such super long lists, it becomes so basically the longer your list elements are, the more important it becomes to include some sort of head element to help your reader understand, okay, look, this part of the list is meant to link up with this part of the list. And that's why B is wrong. B is not impossible, right? It's technically possible, but it's extremely hard to read. Quick check. Is everyone comfortable with this? Why option B is wrong? Okay, I've received 4 yeses, 5 yeses, 6. Excellent. Now we want to get to option C. Let me quickly erase everything I've written on the screen. Now, since you guys have seen this question before, you may already be aware that the first item of the list is spawned. Now, let me start by asking you what type of word spawned is. And remember, when you tell me what type of word spawned is, you'll also have to give me the reason, like why you think it is whatever you're saying it is. Whenever you're ready, please unmute and let me know.
It is a verb ed modifier
Okay.
because it does not have a like an auxiliary verb or a helping verb before it. So it is not a
Why?
verb
Why does
modifier.
it need a helping verb?
So that it is like we can take it as a verb and not as a modifier.
So if I give you a different sentence, if I say the iPhone spawned a wave of competitors, of copycats. Spawned is a verb? No?
Yes, it is.
Fair enough. Rishabh, please go ahead.
What I do in these type of cases is
Mhm.
usually a verb denotes an action and also a time frame with it.
Mhm.
So whenever I see a, a word like this, I see if the sentence is trying to convey or present any time frame along with it, then I try to see it as a verb or I see it as a verb ed modifier.
That's one way to go about it, but Rishabh, I think that may be a very difficult approach to take. Let me tell you how I recommend we look at this, and then you can give me your feedback on that.
Mhm.
So when you have an ed, right? Now we try to avoid these words like ed modifiers, etc. But when you have this structure ed in front of you, there are broadly speaking two possibilities. Either you are looking at a verb or you are looking at a past participle. Past participle is what most people call that ed modifier thingy, right? So when you have an ed, there are two possibilities. Either you're looking at a verb or you're looking at a past participle. Now, the thing to do over here is ask yourself, are you in the active voice or are you in the passive voice? Now, let's go back to this sentence. Let's call this sentence number 1, the iPhone sentence. My question to you is very simple. Are you in the active voice or the passive voice? Okay, we've received a couple of answers. This is active. Absolutely. Remember, active means the subject is performing the action, right? And passive means the subject is receiving the action, right? So the subject performs the action, active voice. Subject receives the action, passive voice. So the iPhone spawned a wave of copycats, right? The iPhone is doing something. It's not getting something done to it, it is doing something. When that happens, when you've got active voice, your ed is a verb, right? Now, there are other cases when you can have certain helping verbs, but right now what we're doing is we're taking a look at just ed, just that ed structure without any helping verbs. If you see that ed and it is in the passive meaning and it has no helping verbs, you're looking at a past participle modifier. So let me rewrite sentence number 1 like this. A wave of copycats spawned by the iPhone. Now, before you even think about that active, passive, and all that stuff, I just want you to ask yourself, which sentence sounds complete? Sentence 1 or sentence 2? Divya is saying sentence 1. Nick is saying, okay, perfect. Now, this is one way you can recognize whether something is a modifier or not. If spawned is a verb, then the sentence will sound complete. The iPhone spawned a wave of copycats. Sounds complete. Spawned must be a verb. But if you say a wave of copycats spawned by the iPhone, it it sounds as if you haven't reached the verb yet, right? You're still stuck somewhere on the subject. And that's a great indicator that spawned is not a verb, right? And the only other option over here is that it's a modifier. The other way to do this is to focus on just the role that this is performing in the sentence. It's indicating that something was done to the copycats. A wave of copycats spawned by the iPhone. They are not doing anything. So we are in the passive. The meaning is passive. But there is no helping verb. Right? Now, why is this helping verb important? Because if you add a helping verb like a wave of copycats was spawned, right? Let's assume that wave is singular. So a wave of copycats was as soon as you say was spawned becomes a verb. Right? So let me be very clear. Was spawned is actually a verb. But what I'm saying is if you don't have that was, spawned is not a verb. Quick check. Is everyone comfortable with this? Okay, I've got 3 yeses. I've got 9 yeses from Pratham. Okay, thank you, Pratham. All right, I think everyone's fine with this. Perfect. Let me erase this. So we've got the word spawned, and now we have 2 options. We can make this parallel to extending, or we can make this parallel to extended. Now, using what we discussed, let's discuss why extended is wrong. First of all, I think everyone's going to be comfortable with the fact that spawned is a participle because the filigree is getting spawned. So if you look at the sentence, it'll say something like this: a filigree spawned by a spore. So the spore is spawning the filigree is getting spawned. This is a past participle. Now, to be parallel to this, we could go for extending, which is a present participle, or we could go for extended, which could be a past participle. I'm going to put a question mark over here because it could be a past participle. It could be a verb. As we've discussed, when you see an ed, it is not immediately clear whether you're looking at a verb or a past participle. Now, think about it. If extended is a verb, can it be parallel to a past participle? Quick check. Let me have a yes or a no. Good. Pratham saying no. Nick is saying no. Rishabh is also saying no, and Ansha is confirmed. Fair enough. For those of us who are not sure, verbs cannot be parallel to past participles. Verbs can be parallel to verbs, but past participles are modifiers. They're not verbs. So, or at least past participles usually are modifiers. So they cannot be parallel to verbs. If extended is a verb, that basically means that we are failing the parallelism test. So the option is not parallel. And if it's a past participle, it is parallel. So why can't we mark this? This is the question that I wanted to ask you guys. So if extended is a verb, if you say that a filigree that extended, right? If I remember the sentence correctly, a filigree that extended for whatever, 40 acres or whatever. That sounds fine, but extended is a verb. So that's wrong. But extended could be, as some people call it, an ed modifier. Why can't we make that parallel to spawned? Take your time. When you're ready, please unmute. Nick, I see that you're typing. You could just unmute. Nick, you're not audible, or at least I am not able to hear you. Guys, if you could just help me out, just let me know. Can you hear Nick? Oh, okay. Yeah, I think, Nick, maybe your microphone is muted from your side. It is definitely active in Adobe, but yeah, I think we're not able to hear you. Yeah, no problem. No problem. All right. Would anybody else like to take this? Extending makes the sentence a little more incomplete. Okay. Remember, extending is the correct answer, Pratham. So option A is correct.
So you didn't you say that the modifier usually makes the sentence a little bit like there is something required to the sentence that you need to add. So that's why I'm assuming in that way.
Oh, okay. No, good question. Good question. I I should have discuss that part of the sentence as well. So we'll discuss this a little later. The part of the sentence that we're looking at, right? It is one massive appositive modifier. Basically, it is just one huge noun. It is not a complete sentence. The complete sentence is right at the beginning. You'll see a subject plus verb right at the beginning. Scientists have discovered something, something. That's the sentence. And then you have this, massive modifier after the comma. A fungus that is an interwoven filic. The whole thing is one huge modifier. Okay, Pratham. Okay, maybe we're not sure. All right. Uh,
So,
mhm,
hi.
Go ahead.
So, with the extended, I feel there is like slightly change in the meaning that it seems like that the giant fungus doesn't exist anymore.
Well, that's a good thing. But what I'll do is I'll just add something that Rishabh said in the beginning. So if you're looking at a past participle, right? Past participles don't have tenses. Tenses are properties of verbs. What you said would absolutely be valid if extended were a verb. But we have already removed the verb possibility because we're saying that if extended is a verb, then it's not parallel, right? So let
Hmm.
me add one more. If extended is a verb, then the meaning is wrong because this would mean that it extended in the past, whereas the fungus is still alive, right? So your point is valid, but it's valid only if extended is a verb. So remember, ed modifiers, past participles, ing modifiers, present participles, these things don't have tenses. They will never tell you the exact time of something. So the point is, you will have to look at the sentence, the context, and then use that to understand what that ing or ed is trying to get at in terms of time. All right, let me walk you through this. Nick, by the way, already gave the answer. So I'm just reading this right now. Nick said the filigree itself extends. This is the correct answer. This is the reason that extended cannot be a past participle. Let me give you a small example. If I say uh, the goal scored by Messi, right? Now we know that as a past participle, we're almost always looking at the passive meaning, right? So if you say the goal scored by Messi, it's not saying that the goal scored something, right? The goal did not score anything. Messi scored the goal, right? Messi is the one who's performing the action. So the goal scored by Messi should be read as the goal that was scored by Messi. Quick check. Is everyone comfortable with this one? I've got 4 yeses. Fair enough. Pratham's also confirmed, and Divya's about to write a yes or a no. I'm not sure. If it's a longer question, you can always ask that. So unmute and ask.
Oh, the goal scored by Messi is a fragment, right?
Yes. So scored is not a verb, it's a modifier, right?
Yes.
So when you say scored as a modifier, then it's meant to be read like this: the goal that was scored by Messi. Similarly, if you say a filigree A spawned by something, which is fine, right? Spawned by something and extended for 40 acres or whatever it is. I don't remember the number of acres, extended for 40 acres. A filigree spawned by something and extended means the action of the extension was performed on the filigree. Like somebody else performed the action. They maybe pulled the filigree or something, but they extended the filigree. So if you want to say that the filigree itself extends for 40 acres, right? You will want a verb because you want to be in the active voice. But if you go for the past participle, you will get the passive meaning. Effectively, the sentence will tell you that the filigree received the action of extending. If you use the word extended. Quick check, does that make sense? Are we comfortable with this? Okay, I've received 3 yeses, 4 yeses. Shohini's also confirmed. Ansh, is this okay? Excellent. All right. So those were the points that I wanted to discuss in this question. Before we move on, quick check. Does anybody have doubts with any of the other options? Is there something else you'd like to ask? All right. Divya's fine with this. Uh, Rishabh's also clear. Rishabh, just to point out, later on, you may want to revisit this and check whether you're comfortable with the way we used to identify past participles. Looking for tenses, it's possible, but it's possibly harder as well. So think about it and see whichever approach works best for you. You can try to prioritize that. Awesome. All right, so I realize that we've gone 15 minutes over time. I have a couple of questions left. So if you guys are good for another 15, 20 minutes, we should be able to take both of them. I'm going to put them down here. Yeah, please go ahead. As always, you guys will have a couple of minutes for this. I will let you know when 2 minutes are up. Please go ahead. Okay, so that's 2 minutes. In this question, so first of all, the correct answer is B for Bravo. And if you notice, the correct option repeats the word wings after the comma. This is the main point that I wanted to discuss. Let me check. Are we already okay with that wing or no? Let me have a yes or no in the chat window. Do we think that that wings is just, why is it there? Or are we okay with it? So Pratham says maybe a concern. Ansh is okay. All right, some of us are okay with this. Right, let's just quickly discuss that. Sometimes adding or repeating a word can help make the meaning clearer. So, oh, okay. So Pratham is also saying that the repetition of the word wings is fine. Perfect. So we'll go over this very quickly. Repeating a word can sometimes make it clearer what you're trying to refer to. So are we trying to say, for example, that the wings are smooth? Or are we trying to say that these airplanes are smooth? Right. So if you repeat the word wings, that clarifies this. You don't have to guess anymore as to what the modifier is trying to refer to. Okay, good. It's good to see that everyone's comfortable with that. Let's discuss maybe one or two other points. Um, hmm. Yeah. If you look at option A says wings, comma, shaped so smoothly and perfectly. The problem is now what they've done is they've taken the word smoothly and perfectly and combined both of them, right? And used them to refer to shaped. But from a meaning perspective, the shaping process is not smooth. The wings themselves are smooth. And how do we know that? Because these are frictionless wings, right? Frictionless wings. You know from the meaning of frictionless, if something does not cause friction, then or there is no friction between the air and the wing, then the wing must be smooth. The shaping process is not supposed to be smooth. The wing is supposed to be smooth. Quick check. Is everyone comfortable with this? Okay, I've received 4 yeses, 5 yeses. Shohini, quick check. Excellent. All right, so we actually went through that question very quickly. Normally, in this question, a lot of people have concerns about the meaning, but it's good to see that we were able to take that meaning call. Okay, so let's move on to the last question for the day. This is the one on Halley's Comet, or some of you may call this Halley's Comet or Halley's Comet. It's a great question. Please go ahead. I'll let you know when 2 minutes are over. Rishabh, not able to open the link. Just give me a second. Rishabh, are you able to open it? Oh, okay, okay. Okay, so now we're going to get going on this question. Now, this question is a great example of parallelism. What we're going to do is we're going to discuss some of these options and we're going to see why that parallelism is important. So we don't want to solve this question by just saying, okay, look, let's try to make sure that the correct option has an in it, right? That's C. C is the correct answer. So we're not going to say, okay, I just want another in over there. We're going to understand why repeating that in is so important in this case. Now, please come back to Adobe for a sec. If you have a comparison, right, as comparison, for example, after the second as, you may see a noun or you may see a clause like it's like a subject verb combination. So subject plus verb. So, for example, you could say something like, she is as tall as her sister, right? Or you could say something like she's as tall as her sister is. So after the second as, you could have a noun or you could have a noun plus verb combination, right? And that's what you will see in some of these options also. But right now, what we want to focus on is the correct option. That's option C. So we're going to understand what it's doing and what the other options are not able to do. So let's quickly take a look at what the correct option looks like. In no other sighting. Now, as soon as they say in no other sighting, what do you expect to see somewhere in the sentence? You expect to see a sighting. Quick check. If you start by saying in no other sighting, then it's only logical to expect another citing somewhere else in the sentence afterwards? Quick check, yes or no? Shohini and Nick have confirmed. Okay. Yeah, Ansh. So if I say in no other citing, right? In no other citing, remember the word other. So in no other citing, let me give you another example. In no other exam. So Ansh, when we say in no other exam, right? Somewhere after that, don't you think that we should get an actual exam, like some exam? Because the starting of the sentence was no other exam. Good. So Ansh is also comfortable with this. Right. Now let's write this out. In no other exam did Ansh, and over here, I just want to keep this word in over here. In no other exam did Ansh get such a high score as again, we normally say something like on, but I'm just going to say in, as in his GMAT. Or let me just change both of these. On no other exam did Ansh get such a high score as on his GMAT. Let's take a second to read this. On no other exam did Ansh get such a high score as on his GMAT. Quick check. Is everyone comfortable with the meaning of the sentence? Good. Now, as you may have guessed, there is some sort of ellipsis at play over here. This sentence is a shorter way of saying on no other exam did Ansh get such a high score as Ansh did on his GMAT. So Ansh and did, these words are understood. They don't have to be explicitly included in the sentence. Now, why are we discussing this? We're discussing this because it's important that Ansh be the subject of this clause. On no other exam did Ansh get such a high score, right? So Ansh is the one who's getting such a high score in no other exam as on, that is, Ansh is getting that score on the GMAT. Now, what happens if we change the subject of the second clause? Maybe the subject is not Ansh anymore, we change it, and it becomes on no other exam did Ansh get such a high score as his Ansh's GMAT did. What's wrong with this? When you're ready, unmute and let me know. Why do we want to say on no other exam did Ansh get such a high score as on his GMAT? That is, Ansh got on his GMAT. And why do we not want to say on no other exam did Ansh get such a high score as Ansh's GMAT did?
Because the comparison is wrong here. Like I'm comparing one to the possessive of GMAT.
And why can't I do that?
It needs to be the same comparison between the two things, right? Like the two subjects should be same.
Again, that comes down to approach. So that's let's say an easy approach, but it's not the correct one. Let me give you a very short example. What if I say I ate more chocolates than my brother's dog did? I ate as many chocolates as my brother's dog did. Now, just to be clear, dogs should not be eating chocolates. But I ate as many chocolates as my brother's dog did. What's wrong with that, Ansh?
No, there is nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with that. If the meaning is actually, if you're trying to compare the number of chocolates that you ate and your brother's dog ate, right? If that's the meaning, then it's fine. That's right. So what we want to do is we want to get into the meaning of these comparisons. Sure, not sure. After this question, maybe we'll take a quick look at why that kind of approach is slightly risky, where we just say, the same thing, you have to have the same thing in the comparison. So just to be clear, in our classes, we usually treat this as a meaning call.
Like basically, it is like telling that how that GMAT could get a score, right? That is the problem.
Yes, absolutely. How is Ansh's GMAT going to get a score? Ansh can get a score, but how is Ansh's GMAT going to get a score, right? So on no other exam did Ansh get such a high score as Ansh's GMAT got a score. That's just super weird from a meaning perspective. The second problem is we really, really need Ansh to be the subject of the second clause. So when we say on no other exam did Ansh get a score, right? On the right hand side also we need Ansh to get a score on some other exam. Quick check. Is everyone comfortable with this just from a meaning perspective? Okay, I've got 2 yeses. Rishabh is confirmed. Pratham is confirmed. Shohini and Divya, you guys can unmute if you have questions. Oh, both of you have confirmed. Excellent. So basically what we're doing over here is we're saying, yes, we're taking a parallelism call, but we are doing this because the meaning needs it. And meaning needs us to do that. Not just because, oh, blindly, I just want to have an in the correct answer. So let's go back to the question and see what the correct option is saying. In no other sighting did Halley's comet cause such a worldwide sensation as in its return of 1910 to 1911. Right. So, in no other sighting did Halley's comet cause. So, now after that, we need Halley's comet to cause a sensation in some other sighting. Now we've combined everything we've discussed and we've put that together to understand why C is correct. Let's take a look at any of these other options A, B, and D, Alpha, Bravo, and Delta. In all these options, you will notice that you have a clause. You have a subject plus verb combination. And the subject is not Halley's comet anymore. The subject is the return of Halley's comet. So on one side, we are saying in no other historical sighting did Halley's comet cause, and what we want is Halley's comet to cause something, but A, B, and D are now saying that the return of Halley's comet caused a sensation. But if we start by saying in no other sighting did Halley's comet cause, then on the right hand side, we need Halley's comet to cause the next sensation also in another sighting. We don't want the return of Halley's comet to do this. Quick check. Are we comfortable with how we removed Alpha, Bravo, and Delta? Okay, so I've received 3 yeses. Nick is also confirmed. Pratham. And I think Rishabh. Pratham's confirmed. Rishabh, is this okay?
I'm not able to eliminate A on this basis.
Let's take another look at A. So let's read option A together. In no other historical sighting did Halley's comet cause such a worldwide sensation as Halley's comet's return did in 1910 to 1911. Correct? That's what A is saying?
Okay, it's return. Okay, got it.
Yeah, it's return. Halley's comet's return, right?
Okay.
So we need Halley's comet to cause a sensation. And we don't want to say that the return of Halley's comet is causing a sensation on the right-hand side. Awesome. Now, the last thing for today's session. Option E. In no other historical sighting did Halley's comet cause such a worldwide sensation as its return in 1910 to 1911. Problem over here is we don't have a preposition before it, before the its return, and we don't have a verb. So what we discussed for options A, B, and D does not hold for option E. You don't have a clause. Now come back to Adobe. We'll discuss why this is wrong. Let me erase some of what I have written. Now this is what option E leads to fundamentally. In or on no other exam did Ansh get such a high score as. Now remember, with option E, you don't have a preposition, so we're not going to say on his GMAT. We're just directly going to say his GMAT. On no other exam did Ansh get such a high score as his GMAT. Now, the problem over here is not that this is impossible. It's not completely wrong like options A, B, and D. But the problem is we don't know because we are just saying his GMAT, right? We don't know how we are supposed to read this. Are we supposed to read this as on his GMAT? So are we supposed to supply the preposition? Or are we supposed to supply a verb? On no other exam did Ansh get such a high score as his GMAT did, right? So for example, if you say, I ate as many chocolates as my dog, that's trying to say I ate as many chocolates as my dog did, where the did is supposed to be understood. So are we saying Ansh got such a high score as his GMAT what? Did? That's not clear. And that's why option C is better than option E, because it repeats the preposition and helps the reader understand how to link those ideas together, like what the intended meaning is. Quick check. We went very quickly over option E. Could I have a confirmation? Yes or no? Yes, if we're comfortable with this, or unmute if you have a doubt. Nick, Shohini, and Pratham have confirmed. How about the rest of us? Quick check. Yes, it's kind of a level 3. Ansh, I would say this is a level 3 call, yes. So A, B, and D would be level 2, but this would be level 3, yes. Personally, I would put it under meaning clarity. For me, meaning clarity is more important than preferences. But for most people, I recommend sticking to a 3-level approach, not a 4-level approach. Excellent. I'm sorry, somebody has a question. Divya, please go ahead.
I didn't quite understand how we ruled out E. Like we have over there.
So imagine that I tell you that you solved as many questions as your instructor, right?
That
You solved.
as a noun, I'm saying.
Right, after your as, you have a noun, but what are we trying to say in that sentence? You solved as many questions as your instructor. What is the meaning?
The meaning is equal number of questions, but the comparison.
Right. So the comparison, the full version of the sentence would be something like, you solved as many questions as your instructor solved, right? Or your instructor did, right? Divya?
Yes.
So if we say on no other exam did Ansh get such a high score as his GMAT, are we saying as his GMAT did? Like on no other exam did Ansh get such a high score as his brother did, right?
Yes.
Similarly, if you say as his GMAT did is one interpretation, and that's leading to the wrong meaning, right? So one way of interpreting E will lead you to the right meaning. One way of interpreting E will lead you to the wrong meaning, which means E is not clear. It's a meaning clarity issue.
Okay, so we want to say in no other historical sighting did Halley's comet cause such a worldwide sensation as its return in 1910 1911
No,
caused.
you don't want to say its return, because see, in no other return did Halley's comet cause, right? So after that, in the right-hand side of the comparison, you need Halley's comet to cause a sensation in some other sighting.
But we have it there, right? So we can say as Halley's comet return in
Which
1910.
which option? Which option are you looking
E.
at?
E for echo.
No, it is not Halley's comet. Its return. It's his possessive. So when you say its return, that means Halley's comet's return,
Oh, okay.
right? Right? Yeah, it's not it. It is its.
Yes.
Okay,
So
so
the
he is saying
return.
better.
Yes. Thank you.
So remember, the basic meaning of the sentence needs us to say that Halley's comet is going to cause a sensation on the right-hand side. So when we start by saying in no other, and Pratham, this is to answer your question. If you start by saying in no other sighting did Halley's comet cause, on the right-hand side, you need Halley's comet to cause a sensation in some other sighting, not the return of Halley's comet to cause that sensation. Pratham, better or unmute? Okay, excellent. Please go ahead, enjoy your day, and I'll see you guys next week. If any of you want to stay back for another 5-10 minutes to ask your doubts, you may do so. Otherwise, I'll catch you guys next time. Thank you all for attending, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you, Shoini. You're welcome. You're welcome, Rishabh. Have a good day. Pratham, have a good day. Nick, you're welcome.